you started in real estate.
Excuse me?
How you got started in real estate.
Yes, I can.
What did you wish you would have known?
Well, then you learn a lot of things because I tell you, when I was in England, we had.
Keep this story. Nice stories.
Hold that thought.
For our.
Hasha, you need to start it off.
Yeah.
You guys don't want to use the headphones. You don't have to.
We don't have to?
You don't have to. It's helpful because you can hear the beginning if you're talking loud enough.
I'm happy not.
How about the mic?
Yeah.
Are we supposed to use them?
Yes. Well, you don't have to really worry about them. It'll be good. However, it's supposed to be that good, but don't worry about it too much. Don't pick up.
Because you learn all your most important lessons from all your mistakes.
Right.
Yeah, so let's talk about your mistakes then.
But there's a good.
But it's difficult to be.
Obviously, that would be invaluable.
Well, it's like a very easy. It's about investing in markets in other countries. And that's the lesson. You need to be very careful.
So should we start with some introduction?
Just say hello. I think it's the 6th episode of Real Talk Podcast, and then you guys can get right into the conversation.
Hello, my name is Katarzyna Suszyńska and this is George Mula, our guest today, and this is the 6th episode of the Real Talk of our podcast, and I'm very happy to host George Mula today, who is an international investor, a Polish-British investor in the Polish market. You may know George not only from the real estate market, but also from the boxing ring. But we'll focus on the first side mentioned today. Hello, George.
Hello, Katarzyna. It's very, very good to meet you here, and to talk about the real estate.
Real estate and you and your story. But before we move on to the real estate, you have to tell me where you got your suit, because that's well tailored and that's so amazing. You look awesome.
That's kind of my hobby.
Really?
One of the benefits of successful investment is I design my own
We
suits.
have some time, don't worry.
And I have them made. Yeah.
Okay, but where did you get it? In Poland? In England?
Well, I have done historically, but no, this is actually from a place which has a Polish, small Polish history, because it's next to the Oriental Hotel in Bangkok.
Wow.
Where there's a tailor, and usually if you ask them who they create suits for, they never mention anybody below the rank of king.
Okay.
So King of Thailand, King of Sweden. And they have fantastic cloths from all over the world. But they don't have very great ideas. So I come with my drawings.
Your drawings?
Yeah, and I spend the first day just choosing cloths. And then I give them the designs, and then we have lots of fittings.
So you discuss the design with them,
Yeah.
and then you somehow get it tailored.
Yes, and they love it. Yeah.
Oh my goodness!
And
listen and take heed.
In the email, you wrote that you design your suit.
Yeah.
You like to design your suit. But
yes.
I didn't know it went that in depth. You give them drawings and you.
Yeah, because there's a lot of detail. If you don't have things made, they're not details you kind of notice, but if you do, they start to become important.
Wow.
So when in real estate, when you work with a big fund, they always investigate you. They have private detectives, and they go all the way back to your school, because they have to know it's KYC, it's called.
I thought they used Facebook only.
No. And they never show these things to me, but I understand that in the one that Blackstone did, there's a whole paragraph on the way I dress.
Really?
And
amazing story.
And they, I was described as a flamboyant dresser.
Well, you are flamboyant, I have to admit, with this yellow tie.
Yeah, well, it's ties.
Is it silk?
It is silk, and it's
Japanese silk?
no ties from Thailand.
Oh, okay.
You said this place has a
Yeah.
Polish history.
Yes, the Polish element in the Oriental Hotel. There's an author called Joseph Konrad Korzeniowski, who is one of the finest exponents of the English written word, writing in his third language, because he spoke Polish and French. He was actually a sea captain, that was his day job, and he was waiting to pick up his first ship as captain at the Oriental Hotel in Bangkok, because it's on the river. And then he stayed there many times, and there's a desk there, a sort of shrine to where he wrote, and one of the restaurants is named after one of his books.
Oh, right.
So it's a
We need to see it, and we need to visit Bangkok then
It's-
to get some
it's my
proper suits.
it's my favorite hotel in the world.
Oh, right.
Because we used to, this is kind of relevant real estate, we used to own with Europa Capital the Sobieski Hotel here in Warsaw, which is 437 rooms, and we had at the end 300 staff. The Oriental, I think, has 352 rooms, slightly less, but it has 1,200 staff.
Oh, well, which may speak about the service too, right?
Yeah, and you have every room has a butler, not one per
Okay.
room, but like two per floor or something.
Amazing.
And it is absolutely amazing in terms of service. Yeah.
Okay, so we've come to the story of real estate, but you need to tell us how it all started when you came to Poland, and or when you started to invest in real estate.
Well, I actually started off in taxation, and there's a connection between very much so in the UK, because we had a high taxation regime before Margaret Thatcher came to power, and people wanted to shield tax, and there were exemptions, write-offs, 100% write-offs for investing in certain kinds of
100%.
yeah, for certain kind of property in enterprise zones, for example, and then there were business expansion schemes if they were property backed. We created some of these ourselves. And indeed, you could invest in pensions, 100% write-off, then borrow from your pension fund to buy one of these properties, which you got a write-off again. So you get like at least 150% write-off.
Oh, right, wow.
Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah.
The tax was the driver, and so I was working, as I say, in tax in a big top 20 firm of accountants, and we did a few schemes, and we did a few schemes which were not tax related, just for our clients, and we put together syndicates of people, and we as employees, we could invest as well, and I invested, and this is a very good lesson.
What's the lesson for our listeners?
The lesson was that we invested in some real estate in California, and we some guys went over from the UK, and they formed a company called Bayd Inc., B-A-Y-D Inc., to invest in these companies. And the name came from the fact that they were in Newport Beach,
Okay.
and the previous night before they formed the company, they went to a Bear As You Dare party and Bayd Inc. And we all lost our shirt because the Californians saw us coming, and we bought just before the big crash came in Californian property, and we literally virtually lost all our money. So
But it was a lesson,
the
wasn't
lesson
it?
is you have to be very careful when investing in another country to have a very solid partner.
But it didn't put you off because you started to invest in other countries too.
Yeah, but
So what's the lesson? You didn't learn your lesson.
No, no, it's because I came to Poland and I became the partner for the English and American funds, and I have, because I have a Polish background, as I said, I'm Pole born next to the River Thames.
Lucky you.
And so in 1989, when the changes came,
Big transformation, the beginning of the Polish real estate system, so to say, right? Commercial market.
There was a know-how fund as a British government mission of 12 people who came to talk about the free market and basically capitalism.
But where did you talk? I mean, were they some kind of schools, universities, or what kind of institutions?
Well, these were gatherings organized by the Ministry of Finance.
Oh, right.
And one was in Warsaw. There's a big government centre actually out in Jadwiszyn by the Serock Lake. And that was attended mainly by journalists, politicians, people from Warsaw industry. There was one in Katowice, which was actually organised in Styrk, which was rather unkind because we all came without coats.
Sounds better than Katowice, I guess.
Well, Katowice was very much more polluted in those days. So
still is.
Well, much less so, I think.
Yeah.
And so it was much more, the air was fresher anyway, but it snowed, so that was rather unfortunate. And that was full of industrialists from Silesia. And then the third one was Łódź, but that was in Piotrków Trybunalski, and that was mainly full of bankers, Polish bankers. I mean, the banks were just forming, but they were young.
Oh, right. But so you came here in this group of 12.
Yeah.
And you wanted to teach us how to organize a free market, or to sell some good practices.
I think probably exactly the opposite, because that was exactly the attitude. Like, we will have a free market, and it will be like this. Whereas a market, nobody's cleverer than the market,
yeah, sure.
and the market decides, and that was actually a very difficult concept to convey. And then we continued. We continued we did a lot of management training, and then I formed a company because it seemed like a good idea, because there was so much to do. But mainly we were conducting privatizations, so we did 12. But again, a lot of these companies, what they were producing was no longer relevant.
Yeah.
But they had very interesting property because they were located.
That could be used in some other
branches. So, and now you see just across the road, Browary Warszawskie, fantastic new mixed-use development, converting an old, well, in this case, an old brewery, which is actually quite topical because during the Warsaw Uprising, my mother was in the Kiliński battalion, and for a couple of weeks she was quartered in the brewery, where, one of the reasons they chose it was because of the grain. And they made this zupa plui, spit soup, because they had virtually nothing to eat. And they made this soup from the grain, and they didn't dehusk it. So that's why they had to spit the husks out.
This is the name of the soup.
Yeah,
I've never heard
but now
of
we got Lewandowski has a very fancy restaurant there, and it's really nice project. You've got Koneser across the river. It's a distillery. It's been converted into, again, a mixed-use project. Brian Patterson, one of the great stars here with White Stars, converted Elektrownia Powiśle.
Yeah.
Koszyki is again something
also
else.
converted.
But lots of very interesting, and not just then in Poznań. There's the Browary, the big shopping centre.
Stary Browar.
Stary Browar. That
Yeah. Which was
Jan-
a brewery.
My favorite building in Poznań.
yeah.
It's beautiful.
So and it's the same all over Poland. I mean, they're some of the most interesting projects.
Actually, I can see two sides of this beginning of your projects in Poland, because on one hand, you came here to teach, to spread knowledge about the free market and so on, but on the other hand, you had to see those huge opportunities lying in those buildings, right? And you represented British investment funds, so there were probably money lying on the streets, right?
Well, you'd think so, but it was very difficult to persuade people, first of all, that the changes were permanent. Then, for example, in Warsaw, you had, because it was more than 80% destroyed, you had this perpetual usufruct was created, which nobody understood, because for start it wasn't perpetual because it was for 99 years.
Użytkowanie wieczyste.
And as I understand it from lawyers, it's not even a usufruct. So
It's just a leasehold, like permanent leasehold or 99-year leasehold.
And the Germans didn't like it at all. The Brits were very suspicious. I mean, the first people who really invested were the Austrians, who felt much more comfortable here. And there are people like Varimpex, Franz Jurkovic from Varimpex, who were great pioneers, who built the Intercontinental Hotel, for example, here in Warsaw. And we worked together on a few things. In fact, one of the, again, a conversion, we bought what was previously an old television factory, Alemis, and somebody else had already converted it started to convert it to a logistics facility, and we bought it and completed the job and converted it. Now it's very, very modern, all this last-minute logistics, so that but we were there more than 10 years ago, and that was well, you know, when you're pioneers, when we bought it, everyone said we were mad, and when we sold it, they all said we were geniuses.
That's how it often is.
Yeah, that's the innovation, right? The definition of innovation, probably, that you...
Well, because neither one was true. We were obviously partly lucky with the market, but we earned half the money. We made a 94% IRR, which is fantastic.
But you know what? Was that easy or it wasn't easy to find probably an investment, a golden investment. But if you compare investing back then and now, which was easier or which is easier? Is it easier to find a nice investment now?
That's a great question. Also, are there any golden rules that apply today just as they did back then?
Well, I think
there's
there's always the golden rule with real estate: location, of course. But that means different things.
But the price is also the thing,
price,
right?
and that's I think a very important rule is you have to buy cheaply.
Oh, really?
If you in relation to the market.
Sure.
It makes a huge difference. But I'm talking here about opportunistic investment or value-add investment, which is the area I'm in.
So you're in value-add or opportunistic?
Well, both.
Let's clear the muds and let's explain what those investments are, because we usually divide investments into core plus, value-add, and opportunistic.
Yeah.
Right, and a core investment is something very safe that you don't risk that much, but the rate of return isn't that high. And then slightly we gradually move to core plus, and then value add, where you have to pump in some money, and then opportunistic for daredevils. Are you a daredevil?
Well. Coming to Poland in 1990
means that you are.
And of course, it's not the most comfortable position to be in because it's rather easier when other people have trodden the path. So to answer your question, I think things are much more established. It took 10 years for a standard lease to evolve.
Yeah.
Because coming from the UK, you have the common law system where you put everything in the lease. In Poland, you have the codified system where you've got the code, which defines many things. So in Poland, we had like 3-page leases, and in England, we had like 30-page leases.
Oh, right.
And it took a long time for standards to be accepted. Also, leases here are significantly shorter than they would be in the UK. 3-5 years very, very often. Maybe on logistics, maybe you get 10.
A bit longer, yeah.
And on other
Shopping centres,
shopping
like
centres,
10 years.
you get
Fine.
for supermarkets, you get 10. And of course, the value of real estate is it's not like a house where if it looks nice, maybe there's additional value. It's not really the bricks and the mortar. It's not the debt. It's the income which comes off the property, which you calculate the value. So it's the leases which are the most important thing. I mean, obviously it's important to build a building which is as efficient and well, even visually attractive, because you get better lease income from it. But it's the income that you calculate, not what you photograph.
Sure.
So most real estate investment is core, but when we came, I mean, nothing in Poland
Was core.
was core.
Or core plus.
So we had to create it. So it was only the opportunistic investors who came.
Dared.
So I was, but my story was slightly different because, like we've had COVID now, which has been a big jolt to the real estate market, but actually not had as much. In many respects, it's just changed the balance. So there's much more money going into residential as an investment, hugely more going into logistics, a lot more going into retail, but convenience centres, not the big. Well, not so much office, but you see, offices. In the last half year in London, there's £1.2 billion has been invested in really prime, good quality offices, and that's what pension funds need. And most of real estate investment is to produce long-term stable income. So they need those offices are great for that. Retail, even with the lockdowns, it's only been 3, 4, 5% down the income, and now of course logistics has benefited hugely. But I think retail is yes, we were already seeing internet buying. COVID has increased that, boosted that, but people have been able to shop on the internet for years. They theoretically it'd be possible to do all your shopping on the internet, and it'd be all possible to do all your work from home, but that ignores the fact that we have people, and people like to go to shops,
socialize,
and they socialize. It's very difficult to manage people when they're not in the office. People need mentoring. It's very important that the social aspect.
But we've been observing some changes in retail too, because having a look at the American shopping patterns, we can see that there are plenty of showrooms instead of going for regular shopping, traditional shopping. People visit showrooms and they shop online, right? So maybe the patterns will change, and at the office market the same.
Well, I think shopping, yes. Even in shopping centres in Poland, you're getting a reduction of the space for the shop because they don't have they have warehouses that deliver, people.
So they will shrink. They will be shrinking still, I guess.
Yeah, but people. I mean, isn't it? And I'm not being in the least bit sexist when I say that. I mean, don't you enjoy going to buy a pair of shoes? You know?
Oh well, I do. Of course, I do.
I certainly do, and I even enjoy more buying my
Yeah,
lady
but I'm
partner
thinking about
some
the
shoes.
next generation, about the younger shoppers than I am, because I enjoy traditional shopping. But you know, e-commerce is something that they prefer actually, right?
Well,
And
but
using showrooms.
but you know, I'm very concerned about the whole, not just shopping, but the influence of the internet, because even you know, young people are starting to lose social skills, and I thought you might ask me, you know, what the best route is to go into real estate investment.
I'm going to ask you about that.
And I think you know, education is obviously very, very important, and you can become a chartered surveyor. And if you want to go into real estate as a profession, that's probably a good route. It just depends whether your primary interest is the profession or whether you want to make money. If you look at most of the leading guys in real estate that made the money in the investment world, they're not actually chartered surveyors at all. You look at Steve Schwartzman, Blackstone founder. When we did King Street Retail with them, he came. I had breakfast with him at the Bristol. It was very, very interesting character. He's making huge donations to charity for education. He just made a £150 million donation to Oxford University, but for the humanities. There's a Schwartzman scholarship to Peking in China to send potential industry leaders from the West to spend a year in China to understand things. So this is not like conventional book learning. It's something else. And so, but just to come back, Steve Schwartzman, Harvard MBA. Ken Kaplan, who's head of global real estate at Blackstone, whom I know rather better, he's an economics
Background.
Brian Patterson, who I mentioned earlier, is one of the great stars with white stars in the region, not just Poland. He's from Texas, but he finished Stanford Business School. You know, none of these guys
professional
real estate
surveyors or
because
professionals.
when you do a deal, like I used to always joke when we were buying something that half of Warsaw's working, because you know you employ lawyers, you employ tax accountants, you employ agents, real estate agents from the market.
Yeah.
You employ real estate experts who are quantity surveyors to analyze costs. So you employ all these people, but at the end of the day, you need different skills to actually, you know, when you're doing the deal, which by the way almost always lasts all night.
so much
So you do
effort.
food and alcohol too?
Well, not alcohol, but
Okay.
there's usually a lot of stale pizza lying around. And
Tiring experience.
but the thing is, people agree to things at 3 o'clock in the morning that they would never agree to at 3 o'clock in the
yeah.
afternoon.
It's like a strategy.
Yeah.
And you know, and I'm not joking here, but you know, people's wives ring and they say, "Well, what are you doing?" "I'm in this closing meeting." No, I don't. You're with your mistress. You know? And this puts pressure on people. And this is real life, you know. So yeah, most deals 7 or 8 in the morning, and then you have some champagne when you finish. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what the government does also, right? Like meeting at night, and sometimes you have to stay over. But that means that no matter what your educational background is, you can come into this world of real estate.
Exactly the point. Real estate, it's not rocket science, and it's one of the few industries that you can come into from any background. Paul Heller, that was the guy I did most with day to day with Blackstone. I mean, I think his degree was in biology or something, but he was an incredibly bright guy.
Biologists are bright, aren't they?
I guess. I mean, you never want, if you're at a party, you never want to tell people you're a real estate investor, but it's almost as bad as saying you're a doctor, because they say, "Oh yeah, my mother-in-law has this flat in left of the back of the Beyond. You know, what do you think?" And I'll say, "Well, ask a local agent."
Yeah, sure.
But I think so. Just on that educational point, I think obviously it's a good thing, but I think
It may help, but it's not necessary.
My own view, and I think they're actually much more importantly, they're more expert people than I. But there's a man called Dr. Livingstone who discovered Victoria Falls in Africa. He was a great explorer, and he wrote a treatise on education and the Greek view of virtue, that education is a good thing in itself. It's not supposed to get you a better job. It's not supposed to get you more money. If that was the secret, then all university professors would be millionaires, but they're not, you know.
I know something about that, unfortunately. I'm a scholar.
No, but you should follow your passion.
I don't even have a suit from Bangkok.
But you design yourself.
Yeah. So I think that's very. You can go the traditional route, but I think you know, being educated, it proves that you have certain mental abilities. But
That I believe that this is the point, that universities are to show us the way, show us the possibilities, to open minds, but not to teach you something very precise and practical.
But going back to specifics, we bought, for instance, the I mentioned earlier, the Sobieski Hotel, and that had some issues before we bought it, and it was actually owned by 4 banks, and it was still functioning as a hotel, but it was owned by 4 banks, and it took us 2 years to negotiate, because they didn't appoint an agent to deal for them. They all acted independently.
Oh, right, that's difficult.
And I didn't do most of the work. It was actually Christian Foynt from Baringpex who we asked to do it. And you know, they argued about everything, every knife and fork, because when you build a hotel, and we built a hotel in Łódź, you know, you have to provide everything. But with a bank, there's no 4 banks. There's no real owner. And so they argued about all the detail, but they forgot about the one most important thing is the price.
Oh.
The price. Because the market was improving a lot during this 2-year period, and the hotel was trading really well.
So they didn't adjust the price that you
No, they adjusted all the detail, when Christian came out of the meetings, I ring him. I said, Christian, did they mention price? No, good.
So you managed to buy it
We
with
buy
the
price,
price that
2
you started
years
to negotiate
earlier.
with. That's amazing. You see?
Because there was no owner. You see, banks are not owners.
So you took advantage of this chaos.
Yeah, so then we refurbished the hotel. And by the way, hotels are fantastic because most real estate, virtually there are no people in the real estate. I mean, they go into the offices, but as far as the investment is concerned, but hotel is full of people. I said we had 300 staff, so I'd go every day to the hotel, have tea with the manager, and trying to help him with various things. We had Robert Sowa, the famous cook then, and we had a very great restaurant, a very good catering business as well. But we refurbished that. That's pretty difficult business, but it's great. I mean, things that happen in hotels. They even make television programs about it, but nothing's more interesting than the truth. I mean, for a start, people invent ways of stealing from you. You have to, for instance, in the bar, you have to be careful. It's not what they take out; it's what they bring in. Your employees are selling their own vodka.
Oh.
Yeah, for example.
It's good that we don't drink alcohol.
And
right?
and then
it's a risky business, right?
People die in quite interesting circumstances.
Die. Oh, you mean hotel guests?
Yes.
Oh, tell us the story.
But so we had, in rather indiscreet circumstances sometimes.
Okay, well, we can
sounds
all...
problematic. But you like hotels.
So yeah,
You like investing in hotels.
hotels are fantastic because they're full of people. I love hotels. It's been a very difficult period with COVID for hotels. Well, I say that, but, Krakow has been the most hit because it has the biggest number of foreign tourists that it's dependent on. But occupancies went down to like 10% or less, which is terrible, because hotels had become really established and investors were really happy with them as being a stable source of
But then
income.
R&B appeared.
Airbnb,
Yeah, but Airbnb, I mean, it's great, but it's a much more hit and miss. Whereas in a hotel, you've got a much more
The
certain
business is quite
standard,
different.
and they don't really compete
Right.
with each other. And I've certainly got a few hotel projects that I'm working on.
But let's suppose that you've got $1 million on your hand right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you invest it in?
Well,
Not residential, because you've mentioned that everybody goes into this segment.
well, I mean,
Or?
that's it depends why you're investing. If you're looking for a stable income, you want to invest your at a mature age and you want an income, then investing in, for instance, buying a Biedronka on a lease, you get probably 7-8% income, and the real estate. So it protects you. See, banks, you've got negative interest rates now in many banks. You have to pay people to keep your money. Whereas here you buy a property, everyone needs to eat. Biedronka's been really, I'm using it as an example, but it's been really
Popular.
successful. It's for the ordinary, it's convenience shopping. You can buy that sort of thing on the internet, but that's much more, people like to see the food that they're gonna eat. And so that's a very sort of convenience centres. That's
your idea. That's how you would use this money.
But whereas I'm at the age where sensibly that's what I should be doing. In fact, I have a investment, a residential investment in Zakopane for 200 apartments.
Sounds great.
Which, I mean, the sales prices there. There are two places in Poland which are so unique. One is Sopot by the sea, and the other one is Zakopane in the mountains. And the prices, I mean, they've gone up 50% in the last half year, and that's very exciting. And then you can make incredible returns, even with building costs going up as they are. The prices are going up much higher.
But I guess you bought it decades ago, right? But now, so this is retail, and this is.
Well, again, that's a good lesson. We bought the site nearly 15 years ago, and it had everything wrong with it, and we spent 10 or 12 years in the courts cleaning up the title. It was like a Swiss cheese, you know, and we now are working hard with the architects to get the permission to build, and by the summer we'll be building. Yeah.
Okay.
So that and that's real residential, not apart hotel. It's
okay. So it's residential estate. Okay.
Yeah, and you know, Zakopane has moved really up market. I mean, it would compare with any Austrian resort. I mean, the skiing's not so good, but nobody goes to Zakopane to ski.
It's just visit restaurants and walk this pedestrian street, Grupówki.
Yeah, and we actually in Olsza, we were just by the Olympic ski lift, the ski slalom run. So
that's your last deal, or not last, one of your last deals probably. But if you could give our listeners some tips, and most of our listeners, they're amateurs, right? So we need some tips for amateurs, how to enter the real estate market. What money do we have to enter it? And are there any golden rules, you know, to succeed there?
Well, you know, Poland needs to, in terms of, I'm speaking now for the Polish market, we need to have REITs because
real estate investment
trusts, yes, where people, let's say, the investments are unitized, and that allows people to invest a small amount of money alongside experienced investors. I think it's very, very difficult and dangerous, as I demonstrated with the Newport Beach, California example. If you invest abroad, it's really challenging. And if you're going to come in here, you need to come in with significant money, unless
knowledge, information about the market.
But the golden rule is, if you're coming in with serious money, always choose a really solid partner.
Which is a message for us today, right? To find a solid partner, a rich one, that's better, always better, and to have somebody to walk along with.
Yes, and as I say, they're checked out very thoroughly.
Yeah.
That means you have to be a good partner yourself too, right?
Yeah.
Because why would a good partner want to be with you?
But you know,
trustworthy.
You know, but again, that's one of the most important things in business. Is character is much more important than brains, you know. And I used to think that being honest and not stealing my partner's money was normal, but I've subsequently discovered that unfortunately it isn't, and I've even had experiences where
So how to avoid those traps? So to find reliable people to walk along or to enter the investment with.
I think you need to do some research. And find people, preferably. These days I do business with my friends, and
because you're lucky to have
it's very, very, very
gathered
important.
them through years.
Yes, and because it's so many things can go wrong and happen, and people, as I said, are quite resourceful in inventing ways to.
So we need to be careful.
You
Definitely
need to be very, very, very careful.
But something optimistic at the very end of our podcast. So we have to be careful, but it's a great market to go into, for sure.
It's a fantastic market. You'll get much higher returns in Poland than you'll get in Western
Still, right?
Europe still. But on the other hand, Poland is in the EU, and I don't think that's going to change, whatever we see in.
Let's vote.
No, I think.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think that will change, and therefore I think there's no real political risk, and in fact, right-wing governments, we may not particularly like them, but actually they get things done.
Stable, let's say, right?
And it provides a kind of stability, and certainly the investment markets are very strong, and yields really haven't come down very much, which is the measure of the lower the yield, the higher the value, so still tremendous opportunities to be had.
But that actually, a question popped up to my mind right now about financing of real estate, because you've invested in many markets, and you've got this knowledge about investing in various markets. And how about the system of financing real estate in Poland? Is that developed, or we lag behind with that?
You have many banks that will lend to experienced developers.
But commercial loan is just one of the possibilities. REITs, we don't have REITs, right?
We don't have, but I think that they will come. But in terms of debt, I mean, they'll and there were German banks very active as well here. Austrian banks have been right from the beginning. So they're more cautious. The ratio loan to value is lower. It's probably more like 60% now than we were getting much higher than that. But in opportunistic investment, you have to have the debt, because that's you leverage. And that's how you and I know we've had a small increase in rates, but we are in a very low interest regime, and that again is not going to change. Governments are even keeping the interest rates artificially low, so that's going to continue for a very long time. So there's a lot of cheap debt in Poland.
Still
A lot of cheap debt. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Because.
Good point, Anna. Yeah.
So George, thank you very much for our conversation. It was a great pleasure to listen to the story, and I'm pretty proud to know somebody that have observed the story from the real estate market in Poland from the very beginning of it, right?
Yeah. I joined Jones Lang as a partner for the region more than 20 years ago. That's when I sort of moved into real estate, and we formed. The way that happened, I was looking to form a fund, and I asked them to provide services, and said, why don't you come and do it with us? And so we did that, and we formed a Central European Retail Property Fund, and we built Voller Park, not far from here, the shopping centre. I was already out there and became a partner of Europa Capital, but
great experience and great partners, as we can hear.
And then when Blackstone came to have a look, they asked me to help them, and we decided what we were going to invest in, which was retail. I had previously done business with Paul Kushmish from Master Management, and he was a retail guy, and so we formed a team, and we bought, I think we spent 600 million euro in the first 9 months. I think we were about half of the investment market in Poland.
Amazing.
So that,
impressive,
that was really fantastic time.
So, wishing you many good investments
Thank you very
in the
much.
years to come. Thank you,
My
George.
pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
You're probably right.
And I promise I'm trying to. Before you count me out, homie, let me remind you. They was blocking the shine, now I think it's my time to. Counting them dollar signs like lights, they'll blind you. Let me rewind to. Back when I was broke and I couldn't acquire 2 cents, and now I got 2 rents. They was sleeping on me, homie, must have got too big. Call my phone, I be like, who this? Damn right, hell yeah, I'm brand new. Smell like can too.